I mean, are we ever going to reach a point where we're going to have a consensus on what is Brady material? Do you ever get to that point?
Well, a consensus? The court decisions are very clear. There's no question what it is.
Okay, well, hold on. Wait.
I know the courts have said that, but I'm talking about in a day-to-day.
And in fact, I'll give the state credit for this. They have conceded on appeal that this should have been disclosed and turned over. They never challenged that. They agreed with that. Their ultimate argument was it made no difference to anything.
In the result.
And that's the problem here, is that the promises of this administration were, we want to respect the integrity of the process. These things matter. We don't want people convicted where material evidence that should have been disclosed hasn't been disclosed. And that happened here. And regardless of whether this administration was there when the red herring took place or now, this administration, in my opinion, should have said, you know what, there was a mistake. We're going to fix this by giving this guy a new trial.
Right.
It's not like he walks free. We're going to give him a new trial so it can be done the right way, so we have confidence in the process that got to a guilty verdict before you affect somebody's life in a way that will affect them for the rest of their lives.
I think too many prosecutors look, when they're determining Brady, whether something is Brady evidence and must be disclosed, and specifically whether it's material, I think a lot of the problem is the very first question they ask themselves is, well, do I believe this? And that's not relevant. The issue is, if a jury heard this, could it affect the verdict? And I think the rule ought to be that if it makes the prosecutor go, then he needs to turn it over. I don't know where, in terms of their training, this idea that if they don't believe it, it's not material is coming from, but that's something that in talking to prosecutors and in looking at how they defend decisions not to turn over material that should have been turned over, that seems to be a huge part of it. If they don't believe it, it's not material, and so I don't have to worry about it.
Well, and I think in this particular case, though, I really don't blame the prosecutors. I don't think they had any knowledge that this was happening. I don't think they have any awareness. I mean, the fact that you even think they understand blood discovery. I mean, it now legally, they of course do. I mean, they are, the analysts, the lab are agents of them. So legally, absolutely they do. But what I'm saying is like actual knowledge. I don't think they had actual knowledge that this was occurring. So I'm going to let them off that tiny little hook. The other Brady things that I think is interesting, and something I've had conversations with Troy about, and I know Troy has talked about, is the kind of going to a bigger picture of what Brady is we like to call it trial Brady. And I think you've spoken about this. Like, I don't think there is, I think it's all Brady. I don't think there's a distinction between Brady and trial Brady, but I think you, and correct me if I'm wrong.
It's not me that's spoken about, it's the U.S. Supreme Court who's spoken about it.
Okay, there we go.
There are.
Talk about that.
We sometimes confuse you with the Supreme Court.
Well, I wish that was true.
You're our local Supreme Court.
There are two parts that are matter to this. There's what I call core Brady, which is evidence that affirmatively establishes somebody's innocence. Mm-hmm. This evidence is not that. Yeah. This evidence does not affirmatively establish innocence. And then there is evidence that has impeaching value for a witness who may testify. And the U.S. Supreme Court has clearly said that evidence has to be turned over. That is also Brady evidence. But it only has to be disclosed sufficiently far in advance of trial to be useful at trial.
That's a toothless tiger. Because, yes, they're saying that, and they've said this over and over again, but every time you get an opinion like this, there's no sanctions. There's no teeth in it for if they don't turn it over. It's like, yeah, okay, you get a new trial.
Right.
But that doesn't stop the problem from happening. It still continues to happen, and these guys still go up and argue, well, but it's not material. I mean, they don't change their argument.
And that's my disappointment in the fact that the appellate division of the DA's office has continued to defend this case even after conceding that this evidence was material. If it wasn't material, it wasn't Brady. And they conceded it should have been turned over, which implies a concession that it was material. But they nonetheless continued to argue that it wasn't material and wouldn't have made a difference. And the Court of Appeals emphatically and clearly rejected that.
Yeah.
Well, and the Supreme Court has said that before you enter a guilty plea, you don't have any right to be told about impeachment evidence. Your right to know about impeachment evidence about witnesses is attached to trial, and they only have to give it to you far enough in advance of trial that you can put it to effective use. And so a real question I have is whether this Court of Appeals would have been just fine with it if they had told them the morning of trial, oh yeah, hey, by the way, she's not doing bench work right now. There were some issues with labeling, and she's not doing that stuff right now. Do with that what you